We concluded our discussion of how by talking about conforming to the rhythm of thought, which is not a paradox, but still difficult. Jack Kerouac, who is known as a novelist, primarily, very much a beat writer, spent a lot of time thinking about spontaneous prose and that paradox. So now we're going to look at some of his ideas in a document called Essentials of Spontaneous Prose, and another document, which is a list called Belief and Technique for Modern Prose, List of Essentials. So let's just look at a few of these things. All right, so Max, setup. When it becomes the sketching from memory of a definite image object, the object set before the mind, sketching, set in memory, where it becomes the sketching from memory of a definite image object. Do you have anything to say about how that might work?
It's a really interesting phrase. I think there's a lot going on. The object of writing is treated here as though it were something that you were sketching. So
sketching as in
so there's a lot of
pictorially,
yeah. Mm-hmm. So he's taking a kind of visual approach to it.
Mm-hmm. Remind you of anything? A manifesto that we might have seen earlier?
In some ways, it's a bit like Tender Buttons.
Yes, it's like an image. It's like the Imagist Manifesto with its focus on the image, a definite image object. So there's not only a fantasy here. Sorry to use that word. There's not only I'll say fantasy. There's not only a fantasy of spontaneity, of being able to bypass language's natural inhibitions or constraints, but of a similar fantasy that the Imagists had of definiteness.
Yeah.
An image object. What's the great thing? What's the positive thing, Max, really quickly, about seeing something you'll describe in words as an image object? What's a good thing about that? What's fortunate about that?
Well, he's combining image with object, so thing with representation, which I think is sort of in line with the modernists that we've seen so far. That he's, in some ways, while there is a bit of a fantasy, as you said, of bypassing language, he's also recognizing that the object is its representation, that is what we get.
And also that the word, if done this way, can be thought of as itself an object, right? Sure. So that language becomes material. Okay, Molly and Anna, let's talk about the next one. Time being of the essence in the purity of speech. Sketching language is undisturbed flow from the mind of personal secret idea words blowing, as per jazz musician, on subject of image. Molly, your thought on this?
Well, if time is of the essence in the purity of speech, you can't wait until later to write about something you've seen.
Oh, nice.
It needs to be...
Do it now.
The language needs to be an undisturbed flow, so you sit and you let everything out, write it all down before you can stop.
From where?
From the mind of personal secret idea words.
Mm-hmm. Why secret? Either of you?
Secret, I guess. I mean, if we think about Ginsberg being ashamed and yet confessing, it's these things that, maybe you can't say in just normal discourse, but...
that this kind of writing allows you to say everything truthfully. Mm-hmm. A word that Ginsberg used was frank and frankness. Kerouac was less shy than Ginsberg.
And I think sketching language is kind of all important too, because if you think about kind of the motion of sketching, it's very loose. Yeah. And you're just looking at something and just getting it down the best that you can.
All right, and the two of you, what about blowing as per jazz musician? Blowing on. I love that idiom, blowing on something.
Well, with a trumpet or a horn, you blow, but you press the different buttons. I don't know anything about the actual instrument.
Those buttons, yes.
I played piano.
I think we called them stops before, or whatever, valves. Probably more saxophone than trumpet, but either one. Yeah.
Okay. But you, with the effort of the blowing, you also choose different notes to sort of get all around your subject, your piece of music. And I feel like it's sort of the same thing with writing, only it comes through your
It's a difficult
fingers.
Analogy. Because while superficially standing back from it, you can see writing spontaneously as like bop, jazz, with its riffs and spontaneities. When you actually think about the blowing, it's hard to create the analogy, right? So the instrument is to what in writing? Not clear, right? Maybe a typewriter or something. Blowing? We know in jazz you need the breath. Where's the... I don't know the answer to this question, so good luck.
Well, I mean, to me, blowing seems like it's a pretty simple act. You're just like if you're blowing out birthday candles, you just blow as hard as you can.
Yes.
But when you're blowing into an instrument, there's a lot of consciousness there. Even if it is spontaneous, you're consciously manipulating
so the
it.
analogy is to consciousness.
That it's there. Maybe it's spontaneous because you don't know maybe what notes you're playing or where you're going to go next, but you're still manipulating the keys in a certain way.
Anybody want to try this? Blowing, it's an analogy. So blowing in the area of jazz improvisation is like what in the area of writing? What's the equivalent of blowing or of breath?
Well, writing spontaneously because you're writing in there, but
I knew this was an unanswerable question. I know that, but the problem is like, what is the equivalent? Is it thinking? Is it? There's no actual respiration in inspiration.
It's writing spontaneously because even though spontaneous, you don't know what word's going to come next. There's still manipulation of language.
But I also think,
like pen stroke?
Yeah.
It has to be something, the act. I mean, I think for Kerouac, typing was a very important thing. He famously, when he could, he typed on a teletype roll so that he didn't have to take any time being of the essence, to change the paper. And so what I'm trying to get, you're making it happily easy. I don't think there's an easy parallel, and I think that's the problem here. But that's what's so good about it. All right, let's turn to Allie and Dave. Not selectivity of expression, right? Not selectivity, which is in quotes, but following free deviation, association of mind into limitless blow on subject, sea of thought, blow as deep as you want. Allie?
Well, that just says to me, first of all, don't censor at all. And that there's something about, blow as deep as you want, especially just because of, maybe the sexual connotation. That just kind of says, like, there's nothing you should be afraid.
Go all the way. But let's get back to selectivity of expression. Is that possible? No selectivity expression. I'm not going to do it because I don't want you to be, committed to this. But I could ask you to speak without any selectivity, or to write without any selectivity. What is that? Is that possible?
Well, I've tried to do free association, or just, I've tried to do this type of writing, and it's really, really hard, I think. And so, it's especially, the challenge, I think, comes from maybe the fact that we've been trained, most of us for our entire lives, to be selective and to be thoughtful.
What are some examples of selectivity in expression? Anybody? Just quick. Examples.
Saying, choosing one synonym for another.
Okay, word choice. Keep going. Max? Examples of selectivity. You're doing it now.
Syntax, sentence structure.
Syntax.
Yep. If you're writing in a certain poetic meter, you have to pick certain words that will fit into...
Okay, that's
super selective.
And that's a very basic thing.
Subject matter.
Subject matter, right. You stay on the subject.
In a larger sense, it's thinking about your audience, not saying the wrong thing.
Thinking about who the audience is, thinking about staying on message. Emily, you've been thinking about this.
Even just the decision to speak or not speak is a kind
The decision to speak or not speak. He is, again, fantasizing. He is imagining what is probably theoretically impossible. You said it was really hard to do. My thought would be it's impossible to do, but it's a great goal. Following free deviation. This is Emily Dickinson saying, the brain within its groove runs evenly and true, but let a splinter swerve. We're easy for you to put a current back when floods have slit the hills. The mind will go where it's going to go, and this is following that. Free deviation, association of mind in limitless blow-on subject, seas of thought. All right, Amaris and Emily, lag in procedure. I love this. No pause to think of proper word. No pause. But let's get to the second parts in a minute. No pause to think of proper word. That's similar to what we were just talking about, Amaris.
So he's saying let go of that selectivity, be uncensored, listen to that intuitive source within yourself.
Mm-hmm. There's a word lag and there's a word pause. Emily, what does that suggest?
Pause implies something intentional. Lag implies something that sort of happens in accident, a sort of system breakdown.
Amaris, pause and lag. What part of the world are these words from?
Pause is conscious. They both deal with movement, so he's talking about the movement and flow of thought.
They also both deal with time.
Yes. Yeah.
Pause, lag. No pause. Go, do it. First thought, best thought. And now we'll get to the second part of this. No pause to think of proper word, but the infantile pileup of scatological build-up words till satisfaction is gained. Explain that.
I mean, the way I interpreted it, he's saying that children embrace that sort of improper, they even delight in an indecent cluster of
What are you saying?
like image associations.
You're being
He's
too
talking
selective
about-
in your
yes,
thought.
I am.
Emily, come on, be
Take off the rainbow,
scatological.
this one.
What is this a reference to?
You mean what the word scatological? What is that?
Oh, this whole thing. The infantile pileup of scatological build-up words till satisfaction is gained. What is this a reference to? Why are you guys so shy? We're talking about the beats. You're wearing black.
Masturbation?
No, oh my goodness. No. Max, come on, help us out here.
Well, I mean, if we think of Freud, children before they're potty trained, before they're taught otherwise, have no problem just shitting to their heart's content.
Yes, but there's no, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But this is the children
Till
let
satisfaction is gained.
children let it go. This is about the pileup. This is not necessarily about children, literally. This is about how infantile it is to be an adult who, what do I have to say this? Who holds it all in. Constipation.
Yeah.
Pause, lag. Like I've got to get to my desk. I've got to get my sonnet book out. I've got to get it just right. I'm going to wait. I have to do it. And then, then satisfaction is gained. Well, he thinks that is all right, see there, I did it. He believes that is the wrong way to go, right? If you got to go, man. Go. One of his favorite words, and one of the Beat generation's favorite words is go. Let's go. No pause to think of proper word. Don't take that thing that your body is producing, the blowing, the air, the speech, the spontaneity. Don't pile that up until you get to the point where finally I wrote it, and satisfaction is gained. That is a theory. It is quasi-Freudian. He's being anti-Freudian. Let's not have a situation where we create this relationship between id and ego, where the id does all its fabulous thing, and the ego makes sure it gets really constrained, and you have no sense of the poopiness of what you're producing. Yeah. All right, let's look at the list of, okay? You all right? You ready for that? So basically, if you got to go. Belief and technique for modern prose, list of essentials. Let's pick out some favorites. Number 10, no time for poetry, but exactly what is. Molly.
No time to force it into a rhyme scheme or meter. Just exactly what the words are.
So the distinction, the opposition is between poetry on one hand and exactly what is on the other hand, which sort of leaves poetry kind of in the dust. Again, what would poetry be in that?
Like a formal, constrained...
The opposite of exactly what is. Of course you want to embrace exactly what is. And no time for that. No time for, meaning I have no time, I have no patience for it, but also we don't have the time for it. We have to do exactly what is. There, again, this ideal, this fantasy, an impossible fantasy that language is what is and that poetry is what isn't, because you submit to constraint. 13, remove literary, grammatical, and syntactical inhibition. This is fairly obvious. Anna, you want to say something about it?
Well, it's kind of like what Stein was doing, to break down syntax, break down semantics, and make new associations that come freely from your brain, not from this word needs to come after that word, because we have subject, verb, direct object things in English.
Yeah, and it's not entirely what Stein was pointing in the direction of. It's not possible to remove. It's possible to remove inhibition to some degree, but not impossible. It's impossible to remove syntax because all language is going to have some kind of syntax. But we're going to meet John Cage in chapter 9, and we're going to listen to John Cage say, I went around the country trying to make English less understandable, because when it's less understandable, we don't do bad things to each other, and we can go about living our lives. He too had this idealism that if we would that syntax was like the army, he said. All right. 14, like Proust, be an old tea head of time. Dave? Proust? What Proust are we talking about?
To be honest, all these seem like they're saying the same thing, just in different ways.
Yeah, well, that sounds like Jack. Anyway, you're dodging the Proust. What Proust are we talking about? Joe Proust? John Proust?
Marcel Proust.
Marcel Proust. French modernist novelist. Really, probably a model for it. I mean, Kerouac's a novelist, so probably Proust is a modernist novelist, okay? And what is Proust famous for?
Remembrance of Things Past.
Yeah, but what's his technique? What's his technique?
It's sort of a time free association almost of different memories.
Mm-hmm. So it's typically non-sequential, associational. Like Proust, be an old tea head of time. Was Proust a tea head?
Sort of. He dips the mantle in the tea.
Oh, literally tea. Yeah, but I don't think that's what Jack means by tea head. Tea head. You might as well spell that out, Max. What's a tea head?
Tea head is what they used to say for pothead.
Yeah, pothead.
Pothead now. Yeah.
Right, pothead. So he's thinking about the way in which that associational non-narrativity or anti-conventional narrativity is aided by marijuana, I guess is what he's saying. 21, struggle to sketch the flow that already exists intact in mind. We've been saying this, but let's try it again. Allie?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes back to the rhythm of thought. It's just, and the sense that you can never be wrong if you're kind of doing this type of writing because it's just, there's already, the product is almost already given internally. You just have to kind of
it
access
exists
it.
intact.
Yeah.
Why mess with it if it exists intact? And so again, there's the body or the blowing, it seems to be a transmission through a transparent language or through a language that doesn't behave as an alien thing, as an alienated thing. Right, so thought becomes language without a lot of interference. This is, again, very difficult to imagine. Let's do two more. Don't think of words, number 22. Don't think of words when you stop, but to see picture better. And let's add 25 to that. Write for the world to read and see your exact pictures of it. Both of them have to do with pictures. Amaris, any thought on that?
I would say not a direct translation of subject, of the object, just like we were talking about before with Stein, but this idea of recreating the aura of the mood, the memory, the tone of the image.
Why
So
don't
focus
think
on
of
the image.
words? Don't think of words.
Because we're not trying to have that comprehensible, direct discourse that he's writing against.
One imagines that when Ezra Pound had that experience in the metro station in Paris, that he was reaching for something like this. This is something like that instant in time, which is imagistic and not linguistic. Though what he ends up is a precise linguistic. Okay, one more. You're a genius all the time. Max?
Well, aside from sounding like it's something out of a self-help book,
Yeah, it really does sound like that.
it is interesting because he's sort of destabilizing the idea of genius, that we are all geniuses and we're all geniuses all the time.
We're a genius if we blow deeply, if we...
Sure, we all have access to genius. That genius isn't something that geniuses are endowed with, but rather that we can always tap into a genius at any time.
You just have to burn your flannel suit.
Well, that's certainly what we have to do, and we
also-
have to get rid of that dead poetry.
If you think that you're a genius all the time, less, I think, would hold you back because whatever you were doing would just be great.
Be in love with your life, he says. Be crazy, dumb saint of the mind. I mean, you just want to get up right now and go do it, don't you? Go.